right. So we return back to the book. We've been reading. We read chapter 1 and 2 already. We're going to get into chapter 3 today. The book is called Secret Cities of Old South America by Harold T. Wilkins. We've read other books of his. Very good book, Mysteries of Old South America. We're going to also get into that book fully. And so again, we go all the way to chapter 3 this time. It says here, Red Riddles on the Rocks. My purpose holds to sail beyond the western sunset bars until I die. Tennyson's King Arthur. Was the new and incredibly ancient civilized world known to the classic Greeks and Romans? They're talking about the new world. Did these old world people know of us? Yes. Remember, we've broken this down in so many ways. Who are the so-called Greeks and Romans, and are they coming out of America? There are rather obscure passages in both Greek and Roman historians, philosophers, and poets which seem to import that these writers had access to lost records, or dim and floating traditions, or myths which crystallize memories of far past contacts with North, Central, and South America. Okay? They knew about the Americas, so-called Atlantis. Maybe many of these myths came from the temple archives of old Carthage, where seem to have been deposited the logs and portolanos of Punic and Carthaginian mariners. Claudius Aelianus, who died in AD 140, related in Book 3, Chapter 18 of his Varia Historia, a curious story borrowed from Theopompus of Chios, who flourished in 354 BC and was a disciple of Isocrates, the Athenian orator. It is a story of a talk between Midas, the Phrygian, and one Silenus, son of a nymph and superior to men and death, and appears to relate to America. Silenus says that Europe, Asia, and Africa were islands surrounded by the ocean, and there was but one continent only, which was beyond and in magnitude infinite. You hear that? That Europe, Asia, and Africa were just islands at one point. You know, when they were coming out of the waters, still coming up, there was only one true continent beyond the Atlantic, huh? In it were bred, besides other very great creatures, men twice as big as ourselves, all right? Giants, America, land of giants. This is going to be a common theme you guys are going to see more and more, who lived twice as long as ourselves. They had many great cities and peculiar manners of life and laws wholly different from ours. In particular, there were two great cities, far bigger than the rest, and quite unlike each other. One was warlike and called Machimus. The other was pious, called Eusebes. Machimus, continually armed and fighting, dominated over many others. The people numbered not fewer than 200 myriads, say 2 millions. Very rarely sickness killed them off, but more often they were killed in their wars by stones or wood, for they are invulnerable to steel. Gold and silver were very common in value, less than iron with us. The people planned a voyage to Europe and Africa and sailed upon the ocean, all right? People from America's going to, again, sailing, all right? Matching what we've learned about the ancient navigator videos, right? We've done, you know, the information we read there, matching the same thing, telling us right here they're going to Europe and Africa and sailed upon the ocean, being in a number 8,000 myriads of men, say 10 million. But they came to the land of Hyperboreans, a people leading very happy lives. Contemning the Hyperboreans' inglorious lives, the invaders thought it not worthwhile going further. What is yet more wonderful is that there are men living amongst them, called Meropes, who dwell in many great cities, and at the furthest end of their country is a place they call Anoston, when there is no return, and which is like a gulf, being neither very light nor very dark, the air misty or dim and dusky and reddish in hue. All right, so that was an account of Silenus, all right, Greek. Myths floating in the classic age of Greece import that this Hyperborean continent existed before a great cosmic cataclysm changed a land of sunshine, happiness, and smiling Elysian fields into one of darkness, frost, and uninhabitability. It is said that the Earth came into collision with a wandering star or great comet, or immense aerolite, which deflected the spin of the axis so that the Earth took some 30,000 years to regain her former position in relation to the ecliptic. All right. So Dutch the hijack with the spinning ball, but something like that could have happened. When we're talking about the way the Earths really move and the movements of the wandering stars, right, and the luminaries, as explained by Enoch. Another theory is that this collision preceded the asteroids, which, according to Bode's law, take place of a missing planet once occupying a position between Mars and Jupiter. Still, another theory is that the proto-moon is the N-word in this cosmic woodpile. I don't know why they got the N-word there, okay? In this Hyperborean world, the sun was regarded as the great benefactor, whereas in regions such as Western Africa, his invisible rays caused him to be deemed something like an evil planet. A matriarchate ruled by Proserpina remained in the land after a great exodus started to the south. It is once more a case of believe it or not. Yet it is curious that in ancient Mexico and in Venezuela, native myths speak of the flight of men before the rule of dreadful night and the death of the sun. These myths say that the sea became frozen over. The Quiche book of the Popol Vuh also has a version of this myth, while the Cachiquel manuscript or memorial of Tepan Atitlan, we got all these books, and we have read parts of them before, speaks of the arrival of Hyperboreans during an endless night. Its author is said to have been Prince Apatzatziles of Guatemala, son of King Hurek, or Yurik, or Hunek, or Hunik, who ruled before the arrival of the Spanish conquistadores. Whatever scientists may say of these theories in relation to the age of man, it is admitted, as in the Proceedings of the Royal Society, Volume 28, that in the Miocene age, Greenland and Spitsbergen had an abundance of redwoods, sequoias, planes, willows, oaks, poplars, walnuts, magnolias, beeches, and samia, hardly trees of Arctic growth. Greenland was then a land of eternal sunshine, with a tropical climate and southern plants not now found in northern lands. The rest of the story of Silenus tells of trees in Anoston, grown on the banks of two rivers. One tree, as big as a plane tree, has fruits causing eternal grief to him who eats it. The other tree on the banks of the river of pleasure has fruits which makes an old man young and turns back the clock of time till he becomes again an infant and finally dies. Continuing, Aelian, it may be noted in passing, was a townsman of old Rome who boasted that he never left Italy and never was on a ship, nor ever saw the sea. So one may expect that he would dismiss these stories as an egregious romance, which a man may believe in or not. As I stated in a footnote in chapter 2, page 65, Cicero thought that another unknown continent existed, inhabited by men, in which Macrobius in the 5th century AD thought might lie in the direction where the Americas were later found by the Spaniards and the Portuguese. Cicero had evidently read the story of Sanchez Solon, Plato, in the well-known Platonic dialogues, which says that beyond the ocean exists a true continent of North and South America. Beyond that continent, again, says the Platonic dialogue, was the Great Sea or ocean. This imports that the Pacific Ocean was probably known to both the Proto-Egyptians and the far more ancient Atlanteans, to whose fate the dialogues relate, all right? Ancient Americans. Again, the Phrygians of Asia Minor, said to have migrated in very ancient times from Thrace or Macedonia, and looked down on as barbarians by the Hellenes or the Greeks, were a power in the old Levant, that old Egypt, in the remotest antiquity recognized could rival all her claims to dominion in what we now call the Near East. One other curious point in this story of Silenus about the land of Meropas, America, all right, Meropas is America, Amero, America, Amero, is that Theopompus says it was governed by one queen Merope, Europa, right? Queen Europa, Merope, daughter of Atlas, king of Libya. She might or might not have been daughter of a king of an Atlantean colony in Africa set up after the cataclysm that destroyed the whole or great part of Atlantis. All right. And again, that part people always talk to me about in North Africa, that's just a colony. All right. Remember that Atlantis, Plato, everybody says that it was bigger than Libya and Asia. Libya is North Africa, bigger than North Africa and Asia. So how could it be a little place in, in Mauritania? It's just a colony. Theopompo says she was contemporary with Hercules, Theseus, and Laomedonte, son of the king of Troy. All right, king of Troy. Who are the kings of Troy? Future video. I'm already working on reading and doing the research just to get a better understanding and present it to you guys. Troy are from Judah, from his son Sarah. His descendants, a part of them went up and became the founders of Troy. All right, descendants of Judah. We're gonna get that video soon. Onfroy de Toron, whose works cite curious evidence of Phoenician maritime and trading contacts with regions in the old Caribbean, theorizes that the radical ATL or alt, which others think denotes water, as does ATL in Aztecan Mexico, is an Egypto-Libyan particle meaning country. This in both ancient Egypt and among the Quichuas or Quechuas of South America was accompanied by a particle meaning the definite article, the. Atlas, therefore, he urges, was an eponymous name, meaning that he was a native of the country, a descendant from the Atlanteans of old Atlantis. And according to this theory, Atlantis meant land of the high valleys. De Toron proceeds to say that the name Andes, the giant cordilleras of the South America, the Andes, right, is derived from the race of the Antis or Antises, Andes, a group of South American aborigines dwelling on the eastern slopes of the Andes. There is, of course, an element of risk attached to philological derivations applied to obscure regions in ethnology, since theories resting on such bases are apt to cancel each other out. However, leaving that aside, de Toron proceeds to say that part of the tongue of the South American Andes is found in the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt and also in ancient Greek. He says that the ancient Egyptians in their painted papyri depicted themselves as a reddish-skinned, beardless race, recalling the reddish, beardless races among the South American Indians, right? Reddish, copper-colored tribes of America. Herodotus and other classic writers say that the ancient Egyptians had black skins. The invasion of old Europe and Africa by militarists from old Atlantis, whose armies were carried in thousands of ships, according to the story of Plato, was, he urged, reinforced by a very large contingent of men drawn from the high valleys of equatorial South America. The South American colonies of old Atlantis were then linked to Atlantis island of Poseidonis by land bridges. It is indeed affirmed in certain mystic quarters in the Orient that Atlantis had an empire extending to the Pelasgian megalithic Greece, Proto-Crete, Sicily, and Sardinia in a very different pre-cataclysmic Mediterranean day. It is said also that the ancient Aeolians or Akkadians, migrating from regions in Central Asia, eventually reached and settled in a number of islands surrounding the great continental island of Atlantean Poseidonis. It was the last surviving remnant of a far greater continent of Atlantis, which may have been coextensive with the lost land of Haiti. Remember Haiti extending from Trinidad all the way to Ireland? Haiti, a land, yeah, from the Caribbean all the way to Ireland. It was called Haiti in the ancient legends of Trinidad and Tobago. We got that on chapter 2. Make sure to catch up on that video. It says here, the theory goes on to urge that in the passage of thousands of years, these Akkadians intermarried with the peoples of the Atlantean islands and were transformed into Atlanteans. When the increasing tremors of the earth and submarine volcanism betocant a common cataclysm, These Neo-Atlantean Acadians embarked in a fleet of arks, reached the Pillars of Hercules, and landed in various places in Spain, France, and Italy, leaving behind them magic arts found in Etruria, Carthage, and Syracuse. Time alone and an immense amount of archaeological research organized perhaps by some international body and collating the discoveries of men and women working in widely sundered regions may someday resolve these riddles of the ages and of an antediluvian world long sunk below water, maybe the long forgotten tomb of some priest of old Egypt, as in old Sahel Island at the first cataract of the Nile, where exists an inscription cut on granite in the days of King Teshazar, who built the step tower or ziggurat preceding the true pyramid, may reveal some ancient history of forgotten Atlantis. Quien sabe, or who's to say? Let Cairo excavate. Continuing, the endlessly shining, cold light, which some Mato Grosso Indians say still shines from openings in great sculptured ruins of incredibly ancient dead cities on the old Brazilian highlands. I remember these old ancient cities that we've been reading about in the Amazon forest have been finding in these old reports. Or swathed in great forests of the same unknown region, all right, these old ancient cities. Presupposes an Atlantean race whose scientists had discovered some physical or radiant force or ray emanation of which we have no knowledge. It certainly appears to conflict with the law of conservation of energy. Such a force may well presuppose that this first, very ancient civilized race of imperial South America were a nation of a calm, dispassionate scientists of cold, calm intellects, who steadfastly eschewed war, armies, and soldiering. Yet unless we suppose that the Atlantean high Brazilians were like the Prussians of our day, a race both of militarists and thinkers and philosophers and scientists, it is impossible, I must be forgiven for repeating, to reconcile such a conception with the story of a land, sea, invasion of many thousands of belligerent, imperialistic, world-conquering Atlanteans told in the narrative of Plato. Very ancient statuary sculpted by races unknown and of whom not a scintilla of tradition survives in mysterious South America are found pointing eastward in Venezuela or Colombia and westward in the Canaries. In a previous chapter of this book, I referred to the extremely ancient statues and grottos of Colombia. All right, we went over that. Found many years ago by General Jose Hilario Lopez. They lay some 2 or 5 meters deep in the ground and included colored heads of horses, monkeys, and men and women all facing eastwards. The counterparts of these extremely ancient hippine heads in gray stone was found in AD 1641. Then, Dom Henry, sent out by Alonso V of Portugal, found a cuervo or curvo in the Azores, an ancient statue of a cavalier who, his left hand on the bridle of his horse, pointed to the west with his right. Maybe a crevice had then separated the Azores from the Atlantean isle. There were inscriptions on the statue in characters unknown, which reminded some savants of Phoenician letters. Snyder may be right in thinking that this statue and these mysterious letters were not Punic, but Atlantean, and that the Guanches are survivors of the ancient Atlanteans who managed to escape Cataclysm. In my book, Mysteries of Ancient South America, all right, that's the one I was mentioning earlier. We've read a little bit about that. We're going to read some more, future videos. I gave a translation of a Portuguese manuscript written about the year AD 1755 by some bandeirista, known who was one of a hardy company of Sao Paulans and Sambos and Indians who, in wanderings lasting 10 years, blundered by accident on a strange dead city behind a range of volcanic mountains, an ancient paved way, riven and smashed by boulders, which had been toppled onto it in some far-gone day from the towering cliffs and precipices environing the road, denoted some terrific catastrophe. I reproduced a number of letters of both unknown character and of Proto-Phoenician and Greco-Phoenician form, which had been copied from splendid porticos, facades, archways, obelisks, statues of men and youth, and fountains, in plazas and superb mansions and temples of the dead cities, all right? They're telling you they found all that in the Amazon, this Paleo, right? Hebrew, literally, Phoenician, they're saying, and all these vast, temples, mansions, paved roads. The place was eerie and most mournful in its desolation. Not a bone of a human being, not a shred of a furniture or pottery survived. Only bars of silver and great ancient coins of gold, hastily cast to the ground as by men fleeing for their lives from some cataclysm or terrific earthquakes. A man on a statue obelisk, with his index finger pointed to the north of this dead city of ancient Brazil. Indeed, there is reason to suppose that this ancient forgotten empire extended far beyond America to Iceland. For on the river creek of Hof on the eastern coast of Iceland may still be seen today, on the weather rocks, letters and Atlantean glyphs. All right, this is what they're saying. Some of these Hof inscriptions are also found in Paradisar Heller, Iceland, as well as on the Assonet Rock in the Tannen River of Massachusetts and Taunton, Narragansett Bay. All right, same writing. One sign seems identical with the Earth-Sun symbol found in mysterious Tiwanaku, all right, in Bolivia. Okay, these are inscriptions they're talking about. Here, the Indians had a legend or tradition that there came to this Massachusetts Bay a wooden house and men of another country in it, swimming upon the river Assonet, as this river was then called. They fought the Indians with mighty success. Others of the Hof inscriptions strangely resemble some of the inscriptions found in the dead Atlantean High Brazilian city, entered in AD 1750 by the Bandeiristas who set out into the Sertão from Sao Paulo. One may ask if this vast lost continent called in the West Indian island folklore, as in Trinidad, Irie, and in the Galway folklore, Airi, extended far north from Atlantean Antilla or the Antilles, right, to what is now Iceland, from the Caribbean to Iceland. It looks indeed as if it did, all right? There was a land all the way from the Caribbean connecting, all the way to Ireland above water, all right, like an island that was there. But as to ancient Brazil, the Bandeiristas expedition was not the first to discover extremely ancient unknown ruins in Brazil. In AD 1641, when Prince Maurice of Nassau and the Dutch West Indian Company aspired to convert all Lusitanian Brazil into a Dutch colony. Now, remember what we read recently about who these so-called Dutch, these Brazilians setting up the sugar plant, these Sephardic Jews, right? These so-called Dutch who owned the Dutch West Indian Company. We went over this information. Let's apply all that we've learned before into what we're reading always, okay? So-called Dutch colony, Remember, that's where the Sephardic Jews had gone. New Amsterdam was New Jerusalem. That's where they had set up shop after the Inquisition. An expedition led by Elias Harkman, a Fleming, set out from Recife, Mauritsstad, into the Sertão or Brazilian wilderness. It was hunting for mines of gold and silver. Like the Bandeiristas of a century later, Harkman found something he had not expected in the interior of mysterious Brazil. The story is told in Latin, in a book by Caspar Barleus van Barle. Here, for the first time, I give the English translation. It tells how the expedition, guided by a number of Potiguaras Indians, reached a burning mountain which they feared to remain by or climb. The road was so inaccessible and rough that they did not proceed till word came from the court that the journey was to go on. After ascending the mountain, they cut the marks of the society on a post, so that the barbarians of the New World might have a memorial in the manner of Alexander the Great. On they went, meeting denser forests and more toilsome heights. Similar curious mill wheels, most de moinhos, were found by soldiers in the forest along the Rio Pequary in March 1773, state of Sao Paulo, southern Brazil. Close to the ruins of a great house, an ancient stone wall, and a very ancient dead city of a large size, with a street half a league long, and moats girdling the dead city. Moats, it may be said, are features of cities of Atlantean origin. More of these enigmatic ruins of megalithic cities are to be found in Brazil, in the district of Flores, state of Pernambuco. Are two very fine pyramids of granite, each about 110 feet high and located at Pedra Bonita, 6 leagues from Belém. These two immense erections are of massive stone of the color of iron rust, half quadrangular in shape, and rise from the ground opposite one another, rising ever to the same height, and with great similarity to the threads or spirals of a vast screw. Again, at Puri, on the Amazon, are two very curious figures of a woman on the north side of a rock, whose head is encircled by nimbus of rays. Who cut them in the rock, none know. The old banderistas of AD 1745 to 55 commented on the ancient staircases of many colored stones which opened into a very wide chamber of a large country mansion in the dead city. It was apparently somewhere in the interior of the province of Bahia. All right, this is all in the jungle they're talking about. Causeways of these colored stones crossed the lake to an ancient temple in old Mexico, long ages before the days of the last Aztec emperor Moctezuma. They were, as Plato's dialogues import, probably Atlantean in origin. Again, the strange region of the Serra de Herere, a name which has an odd and perhaps not altogether fortuitous resemblance to that of the lost western vanished land of Aire, about 15 miles from the Rio Amazonas, west of Villa de Monte Alegre, east of Obidos, on the Amazon. Brazil has an 800-foot high ridge. It is about 5 miles long, with sandstone beds on which high up in inaccessible places remarkable signs have been cut into some enduring, ancient red pigment. Some of the inscriptions look fresher than others, and whole cliffs in the rear are covered with enigmatic inscriptions. They can be seen a mile away. So, ancient inscriptions in these remote places in the jungles of Brazil. At the western end of the Serra is a curious rayed head ornamented on top with a Q, a Piscean form suggesting a comet. One might be forgiven for wondering if this Repustrian sign had any connection with memories of some ancient cataclysm in prehistoric South America. All right, so these are some of the inscriptions again. Precisely similar glyphs and figures are found in the cliff walls of the Rio Tocantins on the eastern edge of the Mato Grosso. These inscriptions are cut on the hard granite and gneissic walls of the canyons of the mysterious Rio Uapes. This little-known river runs on the northwest border of Brazil and Colombia, in a region where dangerous black troglodytes guard the approaches to the Atlantean cities of the dead. All right, they're talking about little dwarf negritos. That's what they mean by black troglodytes. In previous chapters, we read, these are like the pygmies. And remember, this is in South America. So these dangerous black troglodytes guard this place, right? And these Atlantean cities of the dead, full of gold and mysteries. I may in particular draw the reader's notice to two intrusive signs following 1764 and HS, both as one has noted are drawn in particularly fresh colored red pigment on lichened and blackened or whitened surfaces that obscure the apparently older inscriptions. Both may be ancient. A singular feature of some of these ancient stone monuments or monoliths found as widely apart as in the Sertão of Brazil and on the Andes in Peru and Chile is that they ring when tapped as sonorously as bells, okay? They actually ring, just like the wall in Rockwell, Texas, right? Rockwell, Texas. It had like this sound effect. This is some other technology right here. So these stone monuments and these jungles, right, in Brazil, Andes, and Chile, they had a ring to them when you tap them, like bells. I shall have something to say about the purpose of these sonorous stones when treating of them in a subsequent book. With the 1764 of the Aireri petroglyphs and the monogram HS, which on the cliffs are placed in juxtaposition, should be compared letters in the dead Brazilian Atlan cities. With one glyph in the Aireri signs, compare the two Egyptian hieroglyphics, which respectively signified life and Ankh, to live. The latter glyph being, of course, found as one of three other signs, including phonogram and determinative of the pharaoh. People near London may, in the absence of access to the contents of the Egyptological saloons of the British Museum, see these pharaonic signs on the breast plaques of the two bronze sphinxes guarding the Cleopatra's Needle obelisk on the Victoria Embankment. These are three more of the inscriptions on the rocks of Serra de Iriri. As to the first, the slant-eyed, stylized face has queerly Proto-Egyptian suggestion. I shall have something to say in a subsequent book about Proto-Egyptians in ancient America. And you guys know if he got that book, we're going to get into that book as well. So basically what he's saying is you can find the Ankh, right? And these glyphs in Brazil and Iriri, this place in Brazil called Iriri. Two of the petroglyphs from Iriri may be compared with a letter found on a facade on a great public building in one of the dead cities of Atlantean High Brazil, and with a pictogram found in Moon or Coati Island, here in Lake Titicaca. Carrion, Coloan savages, annihilated an ancient white race of bearded men. All right, carrion, we're going to read about that in another book. So they say an ancient white race of bearded men, or a white bearded men, who were perhaps degenerate descendants of survivors of the global cataclysm that finally overwhelmed ancient Atlantis and her imperial colony in High Brazil. An enigmatic petroglyph was found in 1900 by Carl Lumholtz in unknown Mexico. It was cut among other ancient inscriptions on rocks in the Pedras Verdes Greenstones River in the province of North Chihuahua. He also found a striking Egyptian face on a rock 2 leagues north of Islam in 1902, among wonderful monos, as the natives call idols, okay? Egyptian, strikingly Egyptian. This is stuff being found in Mexico, they're telling you. Other signs copied from the cliff walls of the Serra de Iriri, all right, back in Brazil, eastern Rio Amazonas, or Maranhão, in modern Brazil, seem to be of different dates. One pictograph at the top bears what seems to be 3 crescent moons. It may, except in the rationalizing of the folklore of the Arcadians of the old pre-Hellenistic Mediterranean and the Caribs and other races in South America, about a time when in their ancestors' days the moon was not in Earth's skies, date back to the retrogressive era in the Earth's history that followed on the cataclysm that sank the last island continent of Atlantis. An Orient or rising sun glyph found on the cliff walls of the Serra de Herrera in eastern Amazonia, Brazil, may be compared with the pictograph found in the island of the moon, Coati Indians, in Lake Titicaca, one of the last retreats of the survivors of the Atlantean High Brazil, ruined by the appalling cataclysm of some 12,000 years ago. It is the same as that spoken of to Solon, the Athenian, by the Egyptian priests of Heliopolis and Sais, and which is narrated in the Timaeus and Critias dialogues of Plato. The pictogram had the meaning of I, first, before, or in front, Naira, Nairan, Nairaktahana. 2 glyphs found cut in a tremendously thick and heavy stone slab, enclosed in what seemed to be the vaults of treasure of talismans close to the dead and extremely ancient city entered by the Bandeiristas of Brazil in AD 1750, may be compared with the glyphs from Iriri. As I may repeat for the sake of clarity, this dead city was of the imperial places of the white race rulers of Atlantean High Brazil. All right, dodge the hijack, because remember, this author, he's making all the ancient people and Atlanteans all white, pale skin, like, so dodge the hijack. 2 pictures or pictograms also found on the cliff walls of the Serra de Herrera, Amazonian, Brazil are 1. Comparable to the eye or sun sign found in Moon or Coati Island, Lago de Titicaca, and 2 appear to be a very curious picture of a rostral and very ancient war gallery, such as may have been used by the ancient Phoenicians or other race of ancient Mediterranean sea rovers and early circumnavigators of the ancient oceans. The upper deck superstructure is unique, as also the Q and the pro or figured head, like that of a sea serpent of the Loch Ness or Plesiosaurus type. All right, that's the hijack. Talking about dragons, maybe? Dragons? As there is a reason to think that these unknown races possess the Egyptian secret of an indestructible pigment that could defy the tooth of time and the savages of the weather. It is risky to suppose, as did the American professor C. Fred Hart, who saw them about 1872, that both these signs are the work of Jesuit missioners. It may be noted that the Spanish King Charles III expelled this order of intriguers from all his dominions in 1767, but it is known in Rio de Janeiro that Jesuit missioners entered one or more of these dead cities in old Brazil and have left manuscript records of their impressions. Whether or not the sculptures are older than the red paintings on the rock would perhaps need for its ascertainment a chemical physical analysis as well as an examination by a competent geologist. The signs 1764 appear 2 rows above the HS, and the pigment appears to be very fresh and in a lighter red than that of others. As to the serifs on the HS monogram, it may be noted that they are found on letters, not hieroglyphs, and inscriptions graved in stone in the dead city of white imperial Atlantean High Brazil, touched the hijack, entered by the bandeiristas of old Brazil in the year AD 1750. Some of the inscriptions in that city of the long dead of a civilization, possibly in its prime at least 60,000 years ago, in its prime in Brazil in the jungles, right? Include signs which have no serifed terminals. It is probable that this ancient sacred place of the Serra de Herreri was used by unknown races separated in a date by perhaps thousands of years and very different degrees of culture. The nature of the signs import as much. The South American graffiti remind one of the wave-washed boulder of the strand of rock-bound Chatham Bay and the notorious pirate treasure island of Cocos, North Pacific, on which some of 3 centuries of skippers and sailors master inscribed the names of their ships, dates of landing, and own names or initials. Dr. Theodor Cog Grunberg, in his Südamerikanische Filzknügen, South American Petroglyphs, Berlin, 1910, reproduces a figure like that of the second of the IDD signs. He says it is found in the Timeru rocks along the Rio Corentin, Guyana, all right, in South American Guyana, and adds, I found a similar figure close to other rock markings in charcoal on the forefront of Maloca, or big family house that represents a whole village, an Orient sun glyph and a ship with a sea serpent's head prow. All right, a ship. So a glyph of a ship, just like our video that we did, the other day live where we were going over that book, which she found all these glyphs of ships in North America. So they're finding that over here too. All right. Ireri are also found at Cachoeira and Rio Uapis, Brazil, also right there. I may also speculate whether these rock signs in red or ferruginous earths carved or painted in rocks may have been done by ancient cave people or some race hiding from the pursuit of invaders and within caves deep in mountain fastnesses or hidden in barrancas or gorges. One may wonder what connection, if any, these enigmatic rock signs had with the legend of the Peruquis Indians or Lower California, that Nipanayu or Niparayu had a son, one of 3 born of a woman with whom he had cohabited, and who was called Quajup or True Man. He lived a long time among men in order to instruct them and had many followers brought from the bowels of the earth. They conspired against him, crowned him with thorns and killed him. Thorns? But his body, extremely beautiful, never decays, and he speaks to them through a bird. Perhaps the subtle Jesuits were nearer the mark than they would either have appreciated or desired in affixing their creedal marks to the evidence of some mysterious rites of a very ancient American race that anticipated many thousands of years the Christian dogmas of crucifixion and the Holy Ghost, which Roman, Idumean, right, Edomite Catholics, Hellenistic Greeks, and Jews deemed so peculiarly their own. One last word. These signs or petroglyphs found in the Amazonas region of Brazil and at Cachoeira are remarkably reminiscent of signs in the dead cities of Atlantis, Brazil, and of prehistoric glyphs discovered in the wilds of the Sierra de Quintana in Andalusia in Spain. All right, they're the same kind of glyphs of old Spain. The reader may see this for himself if he or she glances at prehistoric inscriptions found on the Piedra Escrita and the Sierra of Old Spain. This lonely wild region of Old Spain, like the Sierra de Ireri in Brazil, is nearly inaccessible and a place of wild beasts and mountain goats. There are 2 caves, and the ancient inscriptions are in triangular niches polished on the 4 surfaces. All right, did you know that? You're from Spain? They have these inscriptions there in that part of Spain and these caves. There are some 60 symbols or hieroglyphics written in a rustic hand and naive manner with the forefinger of a rude hand and in red pigments of bituminous origin. The niches are screened by hard mountain stone, which form a portico or esplanada in front of the signs. They number a half moon, the sun, an axe, a bow, an arrow, a spike of grain, a heart, a tree, human figures, and a crowned head. They were copied in May 1785 by Antonio Lopez y Cardenas in the presence of the escritor of the town of Montoro, Joseph Antonio Diaz y Penez, and the alcalde, Alfonso de Barnabe. More of these colored signs were also found a quarter of a league away in the Batanera, a waterfall falling from a great height. A large live rock, artificially carved, had also once formed a protective facade, but it had failed to save the red hieroglyphics from being partly obliterated by water. All right, so that's the end of chapter 3. So all these findings here in ancient South America, that they never tell us about, vast cities here in the jungle with temples, pyramids, caves, gold, all this stuff, technology, inscriptions all over the place. And they never told us about any of this stuff, and how it connects to many other peoples around the world. So I hope you guys enjoyed this reading of chapter 3 of this book. We're going to continue reading, chapter 4, 5, and 6, and so on. Yeah. All right, we got a little bonus here before we go, guys. I want to read a little bit, a chapter in this book. It's called Secrets of Ancient America, Archaeoastronomy and the Legacy of the Phoenicians, Celts, and Other Forgotten Explorers. This is by Carl Lehrberger. And we go to chapter 2 of this book real quick. And we're going to go over some things we've already done presentations about, so it's good that we're going to go over it again. American History ABC. Barry Fell's America BC. All right, another book we're reading, and we're going to get into and finish all the chapters as well. It was more out of curiosity than anything else that I read America BC by Barry Fell in 1986, 11 years after it had been published. I thought to myself after reading it, the telling of the new history of America begins with Barry Fell, because his underlying conclusions were paradigm shifters in light of what I had been taught. Unfortunately, Fell, the most controversial and prolific diffusionist historian in my lifetime, died in 1994. Although Fell was a professor at Harvard Museum of Comparative Zoology, his first book, America BC, Ancient Settlers in the New World, described a history where Columbus was one of the last and not the first explorers to arrive in the Americas. All right, so yeah, great book. Again, we're getting into. We've already done a couple videos on it. I have the full book in my Patreon for my Patreon supporters there, available in PDF, and many other books there, so you guys can know. This book was followed by his other book, Saga America, a startling new theory on the old world settlements of America before Columbus in 1980 and Bronze Age America in 1982. What became clear after poring over Fell's information packed pages, maps, drawings, and photos was that old world peoples, Europeans, Indo Europeans, Chinese, Africans, and others, traveled to the New World for centuries and millennia before the arrival of the Spanish in 1492. So all these authors, they're going with the out of Africa theory. So they're assuming that America was uninhabited. Remember, they tell us so that when they find all these inscriptions here and all these things resembling, Sumerians, Egyptians, Vikings, and all that, they're like, oh, it has to be that they came. But what if they're seeing it in reverse? Where's the true old world? Again, my ancient navigation videos, we know that they were going over there since ancient times. We were navigating over there. The currents are much stronger to go that way. He used epigraphy to provide evidence of earlier peoples in the Americas. Epigraphy being the study of ancient writing, including inscriptions engraved in stone or other material. Thus, he made translations of Old World inscriptions found in the Americas that included Ogam, for Ogam, Phoenician and Egyptian hieroglyphics, among others. Again, we're going to continue reading that book in coming videos. I began to investigate some of Fell's claims and read other books cited by the Harvard professor. One fascinating artifact he addressed was the Bat Creek Stone, which was discovered in 1889 in an undisturbed mound in Tennessee along the Little Tennessee River. All right, the Bat Creek Stone. We got several videos on that, all right, with Hebrew inscriptions. Yeah, ancient Hebrew inscriptions on it, found in Tennessee. Carved letters on the stone were misidentified by the Smithsonian as Indian markings because after the discovery was published, it was discovered by Joseph Corey Ayob, a Henriette Mertz, that the inscriptions was published upside down. Later in 1971, Semitic scholar Cyrus H. Gordon, PhD, identified this inscription as being written in Canaanite, and he translated a clear sequence of 5 letters as meaning for Judah. Yet it is considered a fake by the archaeological community. This subject will be returned to in chapter 14. Continuing, says here the Born Stone. More epigraphic evidence of Phoenicians in America was offered by Fell. He identified an Ogam inscription on Monhegan Island off the coast of Maine to read, "Ships from Phoenicia, cargo platform." According to Fell, this was a posted inscription informing Phoenician captains where to load and unload trading vessels. Another artifact that Fell says was likely left in North America by Phoenician sailors is the Bourne Stone from Bourne, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod. It was found in the foundation of a Wampanoag house around 1800 and was later used as the doorstep for a meeting house. It is currently on display at the Museum of the Bourne Historical Society. Fell interpreted as to read, "A proclamation of annexation, do not deface. By this, Hanno takes possession." All right, so this is the stone right here, the Bourne Stone and the inscriptions. As it says here, figure 2.6 on the Bourne Stone of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The stone weighs 300 pounds and is 4 by 1.5 feet. The earliest authenticated Phoenician inscription in the Americas is a tablet in Iberian script, discovered in 1838 in a burial chamber at the base of Mammoth Mound in Moundsville, West Virginia. Fell also notes other examples of scripts found in Massachusetts and Oklahoma that were likely employed by Phoenician Punic colonists who came from their ancient homelands throughout the Mediterranean. A comparison of Phoenician writing circa 800 to 600 BC from what is now Lebanon with the styles of Punic writing from Spain and the Massachusetts-born stone demonstrate the similarities as can be seen by comparing the letters representing the sounds B, G, and D. All right, and that's in figure this right here, this image, they're going to compare it to you. You can see this table. All right, you got the one from Massachusetts right here and the one from southern Spain. You see it's almost the same, and the Roman letter it represents going all the way down. Again, Paleo Hebrew, indigenous. All right, look at that in the bottom. All right, continue. It says here the Crespi Collection from Ecuador. Again, another topic that we've gone over. Got some good videos on it. I'm gonna upload soon the original interview of him. Him just showing around his place, the old footage, just so people can have the original as well. Again, Father Crespi is going to say here, in Saga of America, Phil describes some of the many items collected by Padre Carlo Crespi, who was born in 1891 and died in 1982, that are now housed in the Crespi Collection of Old World Artifacts in Cuenca, Ecuador. Born near Milan, Italy, Carlo Crespi Crossi was ordained at age 26 into the Salesian Society, a Roman Catholic order devoted to helping the poor throughout the world. A tireless Renaissance man in the truest sense, he earned doctorate degrees in anthropology, natural sciences, music, and engineering, spoke at least 5 languages, and was, in addition, a botanist, teacher, artist, and organizer of cinemas. Along with being a humorous and humanist writer, musical composer, and conductor, he first visited Ecuador in 1923 to gather scientific data and artifacts for an international exposition and returned in 1933 to live there permanently. All right, so he went and gathered things for the World Fairs. You hear that? International expositions for the World Fair. They were showing what he was finding here, and then probably saying it was found in Babylon. Among his many passions, Crespi was a collector of the arts, including an extensive collection of archaeological relics that he built a museum to hold. By 1979, it contained paintings, figurines, and statues from many different cultures. Among these were golden statues and tablets with writing and images strikingly similar to those in Old World cultures. These artifacts had been gathered by natives from the Amazon and given to him. Fell said that many of the surviving relics bear inscriptions in Phoenician, along with Assyrian and Babylonian images made on finely executed gold tablets. He also examined a photograph of a gold zodiac discovered in the Cuenca area and suggested that the letters were composed in the Paphian script of Cyprus, probably sometime before 300 BC. All right, again, all in America, the true old world. This is a metal tablet from the Crespi Collection. All right, as you guys can see here, we've shown the gold version, the colored version. From the surviving Crespi artifacts and the photos of others, there's also strong evidence that navigators in 1st millennium BC were trading with early Ecuadorians for the abundant gold of the Cuenca region. The date of 148 BC has been proposed for one of the plates known as the Masinisa plaque. Writer Warren Cook suggests that the relief image of the astrologer priest could have originally decorated a temple or shrine as early as 1100 BC. Ultimately, the Central Bank of Ecuador purchased the entire Crespi collection for $400,000. Okay, they got the collection, the central bank, It considered 6,500 pieces as legitimate. However, only 1,000 objects were placed in its ethnographic museum, so the shortcomings are many. For example, the metal relief plates with strange languages were mysteriously not even mentioned in the bank's inventory, and subsequently, no relief plates were displayed. Also, many objects that had previously been photographed have not been accounted for or seen since, including photos of figurines and relief plates that were published by Eric von Daniken in his book Gold of the Gods. All right, so they're hiding so many things, right? They're probably working together with the Vatican, and they just like, yeah, this is okay right here, and they got it in their collection there, but nobody really gets to see it. There remains confusion over the missing artifacts, with indications that some may remain with the bank or that the Salesians have them, while others may have ended up in private collections. A more recent researcher, Richard Wingate, offers evidence in Los Outposts of Atlantis. All right, we've read that book again in the video I did for Father Crespi, for the authenticity of many of the items in the Crespi collection. He notes similar epigraphy in Father Crespi's collection was also labeled a clumsy Indian fraud until better trained scholars discovered some inscriptions were written in classically pure Egyptian hieroglyphics. All right, so frauds don't know that language. Egyptian hieratic, Libyan and Celtic, Iberian and Punic. All right, that was all found in these collections. All right, in Ecuador, beginning about 2613 BC. The Phoenicians had particularly strong cultural relationship with the Egyptians, who could have arrived in the Americas. Could have arrived, right? Could have. Egyptians were right here to marry, talking about right here, trade amongst the rest of the world from here. with the help of the extensive Phoenician mercantile navies, who, according to Fell, left evidence in places such as Brazil, Paraguay, Ecuador, Oklahoma, Iowa, and Massachusetts. All right. And we continue in the chapter, says other Phoenician American discoveries. Fell cited two other examples of Phoenician artifacts in Saga America. He said that a metal urn discovered in an excavation carried out by the Middlebury Archaeological Research Center in New York contained Phoenician themes of the goddess Astarte with dancing women, and was cited by Fell as being similar to Cypriot Phoenician ornaments from around 600 BC. Fell also noted an engraved rock inscription in Nevada of Phoenician origin that had previously been described as an Indian petroglyph. He wrote that this rock inscription found at Massacre Lake, originally reported in 1958, was a prayer for rain in the Punic language of Carthage. Okay, this is what they're finding here in Nevada. Reading right to left, Fell interpreted as to read, "May the clouds spew forth rain." In other passages of America BC, Fell wrote that Rowan bands of Celtic mariners crossed the North Atlantic beginning around 400 BC to discover and then colonize North America. These included Irish, Welsh, and Gaelic speakers from the Ireland, Britain, and France. He claimed that the Celts in these countries had originally come from Spain and Portugal by way of the Canary Islands, where they found a trade winds that eventually carried them to America, as Columbus did much later. Fell explained his rationale. All right, so again, this is the true old world. They're seeing it all in reverse. So continue, it says here, hundreds of buried ancient coins add evidence that ancient travelers and colonists were in the Americas. And in Saga America, Fell noted that based on the frequency and timeframes of production, these coins were directly tied to the rise and fall of ancient Mediterranean naval powers, including the Carthaginians, Romans, Byzantines, Greeks, and Arabs. Again, all these people, this is the true old world. This was all going on right here. In North America and Europe, the distribution of coins also shows a strong correlation with coastal and navigable river waterways. While ancient coins have most often been found by farmers plowing farmland, they have also been discovered using metal detectors on beaches and stream beds, in wells, and under building foundations. In all, nearly 200 ancient coins have turned up on the Atlantic coast of New England, and as many as 250 have turned up on the Gulf Coast from Florida to Texas. While the third largest distribution, 90 coins, is in the copper mining region of Michigan. Okay, so here we got a Roman coin from the 5th century AD found 3 feet deep in Springfield, Colorado. All right, in Colorado. It says here the Davenport relics conspiracy. All right, so we've gone over the Davenport relic, and that was found under an official excavation with the Smithsonian, and it's in the very scholarly book we've read. It's not a fraud, and it contains a lot of this writing that we've been talking about. It says, while America BC and other of Fell's books and articles presented hundreds of examples of Old World contacts with the New World before Columbus, one of the most compelling to me was what Fell referred to as the Davenport's calendar stele or tablet. It was said to have been uncovered in 1874 in a burial mound near Davenport, Iowa, by the Reverend Jacob Gass, who also had possessions of 2 other inscribed tablets that he claimed he found while excavating other large earth mounds in Iowa. Considered quite a significant discovery at the time, the tablet was 12 inches long and about 10 inches wide, and had inscriptions on both sides that Fell interpreted to be etched in 3 languages: Egyptian hieroglyphic, Iberian Punic, and ancient Libyan. According to Fell, what seemed incontrovertible about this artifact is that neither Libyan nor Iberian scripts had been deciphered when it was discovered. Okay, so nobody could have known that language in 1874 is what they're telling you. It can't be a fraud, because they didn't even discover this language until much later. Whoever wrote it was actually from the time of when that language existed. It was here in the Americas. They found that right there in Iowa. The stele appears to be of local American manufacture. It was perhaps made by a Libyan or an Iberian astronomer. Thus the hijacked it from here, who occupied an older model brought from Egypt, or more likely from Libya or a Libyan ship. Or more likely, it's all guesses. According to Fell, a priest of Osiris may have, right, probably, could have, all guesses, issued the stone originally as a means of regulating the calendar in far distant lands. The date is unlikely to be earlier than about 800 BC, for we do not know of Iberian or Libyan inscriptions earlier than this date. All right, so that was the end of the chapter. It's pretty quick, actually. It starts talking about the Davenport tablet controversy. We've gone over it. Make sure to catch the videos that I've gone over before. We show actually a lot of sources on these topics. This was a quick bonus. Hope you guys enjoyed both readings today. Thanks for tuning in once again, guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.
You can